All right, everybody, it is time for Southeastern Rewind's Tell Me More. Hey, y'all, I'm David Sommers with the Tennessee stud Ron Fuller, answering 5 questions from the latest Studcast, now on Ron's new home on YouTube. The 5 questions on this edition of Tell Me More come from Studcast episode number 13. It's called Family Feud. And remember to find Southeastern Rewind on YouTube, subscribe, ring the bell to get reminders on when the greatest stories in wrestling will be dropped on YouTube. And be sure to tell your friends about Southeastern Rewind. Stud, I say it every week, but you're doing it. You're knocking it out of Chilhowie Park, and you've hit another milestone. You're over the 1,000 mark on subscribers on YouTube. That's a big deal, dude.
Yes, it is. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it, and I really appreciate all those out there that have made that happen, that are going out there and subscribing and ringing that bell. And obviously, it is a milestone in a way for YouTube, and we've reached it pretty quickly. And it's just been wonderful. Now we got this. We did this Southeastern 1978 show. That was just tremendous, man. And that thing got almost 2,000 views in 2 days. So,
yeah.
That means that everybody saw it twice.
Dude, it's awesome, and that's what folks are looking for, and it hit that number, and literally, you're right, it's almost at 2,000, and it's only been on there 3 days. So it is the perfect place for stud fans and Studcast fans, Southeastern fans, everybody to get together and listen. The more of these that show up, and they'll start showing up soon, the better it's going to get.
Oh, yeah, and they are going to be coming soon. In fact, I think we're going to try to get out this week the review. Les Thatcher is going to join me, and we're going to review that Southeastern 1978 show. Talk about all the things and the elements in it that were really, really good. The technology, the animated opening, the personality profile was a great one. So it's going to be. I'm really, really looking forward to this. It's going to be great, and maybe within the next 2 weeks, we're going to get the first USA Championship Wrestling show with Gordon Soley, Volume 1.
That is really gonna kick in big time, and then we're gonna be doing way more than spinning the wheels. And by the way, don't let Les talk too much about how pretty he is on the Reflection Show. All right, so all right, I got 5 questions. You good?
Yes, sir. I'm ready, my man.
All right, episode number 13. That's the one these are from. And Bradley Davis gives us the first question, which is, was Sputnik Monroe demoted to less important matches on the card after his embarrassment at the state fair?
That's a great question. And you would think that'd be definitely the case. And for maybe those that didn't hear this episode and they're listening to the Tell Me More part of it, I want to just go back real quickly and kind of give everybody an update on what this event is all about and what this gentleman, Mr. Davis here, is talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And Sputnik Monroe, on I think it was a Saturday night of all nights, having a big rodeo. It's the Mid-South Fair in Memphis. And it's packed with people. And Sputnik he's had a few drinks, and he goes down wearing his Tennessee championship belt around the outside of his clothes, down to the rodeo, looking to pick a fight. Right? I mean, it was like, and obviously he didn't tell my dad, who's the promoter, that, hey, I think I'm going to go down there Saturday night and wear my belt outside my pants and see if I can get something going, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, so Sputnik goes down there, and basically he finally finds a cowboy there, and he insults the cowboy, and the guy says, no. He goes, no, I know who you are. You're Sputnik Monroe. You're a wrestler. You ain't gonna get no problem out of me. So Sputnik looked over there, and the guy's wife was there. He says, hey, he says, that's your ugly wife?
Oh my God.
Yeah, so Butts says he's feeling pretty good, right? He's feeling his oats, and so he insults the cowboy's wife,
Yeah.
And the cowboy says same thing. He says, "No, no, you ain't gonna get me riled up. By gosh, I know who you are and the whole deal." And then Sputnik says, "Well, okay." And the guy's horse is standing there. And Sputnik reaches over and grabs the horse's rein and jerks his head down. And that was all it took.
Oh, yeah.
The guy popped him, man. Knocked him down and put the boots to him. And it just goes to show you, to some cowboys, your horse is worth more than your wife.
What was he thinking? What in the hell? All right. So was there any fallout from that?
Well, of course there was. I mean, the next morning, Dad got up at Sunday morning paper, pulled it out, and there it was, the front page of the sports. Monroe down on the ground, the guys putting the boots to him. And Tennessee champion, man.
Yeah, that's your champion. Yeah.
Oh, it's like, wow. Dad's like, oh, he's killed my territory. I mean, it was a huge, huge mistake. A big, and then the papers, they rode with it because they didn't like to put wrestling in there as being real.
Mm-hmm.
And this was just something that everybody was like, wow, this is cool, man. Look at that. Oh, we knew it was all a phony bunch of stuff, right? So the question, I think, was Sputnik demoted after this event?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Like down lower on the card. Well, Sputnik didn't get demoted in Memphis. I mean, Sputnik could have got beat up by a 3-year-old in Memphis and still been on the main event. I mean, he was just over so strong there.
Yep.
You couldn't move Sputnik down that card. He was the biggest thing in Memphis, and not just in wrestling, but in just about everything there. Only Elvis was bigger than Sputnik, probably.
Wow.
Wow. So it was really that because this happened, then Dad had to jump into action, and what else was he going to do but to go find this cowboy, which he did. He got my uncle Lester Welch involved. Lester was working there. Lester was a cowboy, knew a lot of those cowboys. He rode cows and dog steers. He did rode bulls. He did it all. And so he knew a lot of them, and he finally tracked down the guy that popped Monroe. And Dad said, hey, go find him, Lester, and offer him $2,000 in cash if he'll come and wrestle Monroe next Monday night. Two nights later.
This is one of those stories in episode number 13 that I had forgotten. Now, episode 12, I remembered a lot of, but now it's all coming back. But so go ahead with the story.
Yeah, so Dad has Lester go and offer the cowboy $2,000 to come to Memphis, the Ellis Auditorium in Memphis, and wrestle Monroe.
Mm-hmm.
And so the cowboy, when Lester tells him this story, and Dad tells me this story, we talk about this quite a bit, but Dad says that Lester came back, and Dad said, "Well, what did he say after you offered him the $2,000?" And he said, "I knew you guys was doing something." He goes, I knew I couldn't have beat him. I knew he wouldn't go down like that. Y'all are setting me up, yeah, he says, y'all are setting me up. You want me to come to Memphis, and y'all going to have him beat the hell out of me, right? So he wouldn't come. The cowboy refused to come. And so then Dad finally got with the papers and said, hey, he corroborated Lester's story.
Mm-hmm.
And the papers had to go, well, the guy wouldn't come and wrestle Monroe. He wouldn't do it again, So Dad kind of smoothed it over. But wow, it was probably one of them. Well, you can imagine, man, when you're a wrestling promoter, that's one of the worst things that could happen to you.
Yeah.
You didn't want your guys going out to bars. I used to tell guys, don't even go to bars.
Right,
man.
right.
Yeah, you just be careful, man. And if you get your butt whipped, then you get a notice right then.
Mm-hmm.
You're gone. So,
yeah.
So So it was a really a big time incident. Made front page. It was a big story because Sputnik was such a big story at that point.
Yeah.
It was a monumental story, and Dad kind of turned it around to where it didn't kill the town.
Yeah.
If he hadn't have done it the way he did it, and the cowboy had have said, "Yeah, I'll come up there," well, he might have whipped Sputnik's butt again.
Right. Right. Right.
But knowing Dad, I think Dad would have probably had if Sputnik had gotten the ring and the cowboy came down there, Dad wouldn't have taken no chance. He would have had one of his heels that was a real shooter go running down the ring and beat the hell out of the cowboy before they rang the bell.
Yeah.
He would have switched to heat.
Well, the only thing worse that could have happened to Sputnik would have been to get his ass whipped in Waffle House.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, yeah. So really, really a funny situation here, man. So that's a great question, though, and it's kind of a funny one in a way, but boy, it's a scary one in a way if you're a promoter and you've spent years building your town, and wow, all of a sudden, some incident like that's going to just kill it all.
Yeah.
Could have happened.
Clocked at the rodeo, no doubt. All right, question number 2. Daniel Foster was, and maybe you just answered this, was Sputnik as dangerous as he looked?
Well, Sputnik had the skunk streak, I called it, in his black hair.
Yep.
The peroxided skunk streak down the back in the middle of his head. And he was a rugged looking guy. When you saw pictures of Sputnik, it's like, oh boy, this guy's a tough son of a gun, right? He just had the busted eyes. He'd done a lot of hard ways, and his eyes were his eyebrows and were all just broken cuts and scars and scar tissue and all that stuff. So yeah, he really did look dangerous, man, But the problem for Sputnik was he was never a shooter. He was a good wrestler because he was such a great athlete, but he really didn't know how to hurt anybody. He hadn't ever been in a snake pit, and if he had been, he'd probably been the one getting stretched rather than doing the stretching. But I want to tell a story, Dave, man, that this is about Sputnik, and and I asked the same question to my dad in a way. And I asked myself this several times because Sputnik was in Atlanta when we went there in 1964. Dad brought him in. About 1966, he was top heel there. He was on top, and he came out to visit us one time at our ranch. We lived outside Griffin, Georgia, and he had his wife with him and his little girl. And, they spent the afternoon, and Sputnik was always making a lot of noise. He's one of those guys that was just, he was a real character. And so somewhere in the afternoon, he had a few drinks and everything. And I was about 6'6", and I weighed about 160 pounds. I mean, I looked like a rail, man. I had no muscle on me.
How old were you?
I was 16. 16. I was in the 11th grade. I was 17 years old,
okay.
6'6", 160 pounds, and then hadn't worked out hardly any in my life. But Dad had taught me to shoot. He taught me to do enough shooting, and I was pretty good at it, that people would come out sometimes to the country. They'd find out where Dad lived, and they would ask, they bang on the door, and they'd say, hey, I've had guys that gone to the door and they say, hey, is Buddy Fuller live here? And I'd say, yeah, he does. And they say, I want to wrestle him. And so Dad would always take me out in the yard, and we didn't have a ring in Griffin. So we'd just go out into the yard, and Dad would tell the guy, whoever it was, he'd say, hey, well, look, if you beat this skinny kid here, I'll wrestle you. And nobody ever got to Dad. I beat them all, right? And so Sputnik got to messing with me that afternoon, and so Dad said, well, why don't we'll just go out back here, me, you, and old Sputs here, and we'll see what happens, right? So Dad got us down on hands and knees, and then I hooked him in an Oklahoma ride. I couldn't beat him, but he couldn't get up. And he was humiliated. He was mad. He was really mad. He was like, "Oh, this punk! I'll get out of here. I'm gonna hurt you, boy." He was really, really, and he was training. He was trying his best, but I just hanging on to him. Right, I knew that I could keep him on the ground, and I knew that I couldn't make him give up, but I knew he wasn't going to get away from me in an Oklahoma ride. So this went on for about 15 minutes. I held him for 15 minutes. And his wife came out the front door, and she saw us in the yard, and she says, "What's going on out here?" And Sputnik says, "Get in the house. Get in the house. You don't need to be seeing this." Because I still got him hooked. And she comes over, and she says, "What's the matter, honey? Has he got you?" Yeah. I'm 17-year-old kid, right? Oh, Dad's laughing his butt off. He's like, "Wow, this is good." And then she says, finally she goes, "Ron, would you let him go?" We need to go home. So I let Sputnik go. And he never forgave me for it. And all the times I wrestled him years after, man, every time he did, "Yeah, you punk." You're just a punk. You're just a punk,
Wow.
So good question. Yeah, Sputnik looked awful dangerous, but no, he really wasn't too dangerous. And that's why you had to be careful with some wrestlers. If you had a guy that was a really talented guy and he looked tough and he wasn't tough, and you had him on top as your champion, you really had to stay on top of him. You didn't want him going out places where something like that happened at the rodeo with Sputnik was going to happen to him, because, wow, it kicked your business in the ass.
Well, and he was probably he was a better showman than he was an actual wrestler or scrapper.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, much better showman. Oh, yeah. God. He was a fantastic showman, as a matter of fact. He had that down for sure.
Yeah.
He just needed to have a couple more years of wrestling training before he started to collect those other skills.
Yeah, all the kids watching TV thinking, "Man, I wish old Sputnik could come to my house," and there you are fighting with him in the front yard. So, all right. Number 3, Justin Taylor asks, did any promoter have a way to fight Roy's athletic commission in court, or was it even worth the hassle?
Well, another good question, man. This is a good one this week. Well, for people that don't know what he's talking about with Roy's athletic commission, if you didn't listen to number 13 and you're just hearing this question, Roy made a point of pretty early on, got really smart about how to keep other people from getting in the wrestling business and having what was called opposition. He wanted to be the only man to run wrestling in the South. And he pretty much made that happen because he went around to all the states, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Arkansas, Missouri, Kentucky, all these states in Louisiana, all the states in the South, basically. And he formed these athletic commissions. He said, we need a boxing and wrestling commission. I'm the promoter here, and it's the right thing to do. We don't want to make mistakes here. We want to have good people running the business, all that stuff. And he got himself in. He became the promoter in the South. And so if somebody else came along and they decided they wanted to run Memphis as an example, then Roy would go to the athletic commission and he'd say, "No." Hey, I take care of you guys. I pay y'all. I pay y'all some money, and and it's time for y'all to take care of me. So when this guy comes up and he asks for a license, you say no.
Right.
It's a simple deal. Right. So the question is pretty good. So if any promoter came along and he wanted to become a wrestling promoter, he had to go to the wrestling commission, the boxing and wrestling commission, and he was going to get told no. It didn't make any difference who he was because he wasn't giving them bread. Roy was giving them bread.
Mm-hmm.
So they owed him that back, I guess, and And I don't think I ever heard of anyone taking any of the athletic commissions in the South to court until I did.
Right.
In the 1980s. I took them to court because what happened is Roy had control of all these states, but as he grew older, he lost control. And all of a sudden, instead of them protecting him, they were turning their backs on him. They didn't care anymore, because they were getting paid then by the state rather than by Roy.
Yep.
And, it was a whole different deal. So they never went to court, and I finally took them to court. I took the state of Tennessee. I won in Tennessee. I won in Alabama. They reversed the decision, and I went back and won again in Alabama in I think it was about 1982. And I remember I was concerned that they were going to take the decision in court. They were going to go and try to reverse that decision on me.
Mm-hmm.
So George Wallace was the governor of Alabama, and me and old Jimmy, who was a Montgomery boy, been grown up there and wrestled there as a kid. We went down and sat down with George Wallace. Wow, what an experience that was, Dave.
Wow.
He'd been shot. He was in a wheelchair, and he
Yep.
was looking across at us, and he was saying, "Oh, you boys don't know how lucky you are. I'm in this chair, and look at you. You're healthy, and you're a couple of studs, right? And one of those deals, And so at the end of the meeting, we went there to see if he'd help us to make sure that nobody overruled this decision to kill the Alabama Boxing and Wrestling Commission."
Mm-hmm.
And so at the end of the conversation, and we probably were in there 45 minutes with him. I couldn't believe he talked to us as long as he did.
Wow.
And then finally he says, "Boys, I'm sure you're here for something. What is it?" So I had on a suit, and I got up, and I had to walk over to his desk, and I had $5,000 and $100 bills in an envelope. And I set it on his desk. I went back to my chair and I said, "George, I told him the whole story. We've killed the athletic commission here, and we think, that they're going to be trying to overturn that ruling. And, we really always been a supporter of you, and we want to support you again, George."
Mm-hmm.
And it was really funny, Dave. He took that, he pulled the $100 bills out the top of the little envelope, and he filed it through with his fingers. Just went like that.
Yeah.
And he counted it. I could tell he counted it. It wasn't his first cash, man.
Right, right.
Yeah, and it was like putting it in one of those money machines.
Yeah,
that was it. He knew it was $5,000.
Wow.
And he looked at us. He kind of got a little grin on his face. He took the envelope. He stuffed it in his sport coat, and he looked at us and he said, "Boys," he said, "I don't think y'all ever going to have to worry about that Boxing and Wrestling Commission in Alabama no more."
You made a nice donation to his cause.
I certainly did.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
But very few people, to begin with, very few people didn't have knowledge of the wrestling business. It's an intricate business, and it's totally different than other businesses. And how many people, and they didn't have the connections to get the wrestlers. You're not going to have many people come and try to become a wrestling promoter just out of nowhere. And if they do, they lose their butts, man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they lose a lot of money. So, and then the last part of this question, Mr. Taylor, Justin Taylor, I think it was, is if you got past the athletic commission, you might have to deal with Roy. And I don't think that'd be a good idea. I mean, that's the last guy you want to run into in a dark alley would be Roy Welch.
Yeah, no volunteers or takers on that. All right, so again, this is episode number 13. The questions are from, and here is question number 4. Tommy Smith says, did each promoter in the NWA get a vote on who would represent them as the NWA champion, or was the voting among a smaller contingent of promoters? How did that go?
Wow, man. Another good question, man. This is far from this particular episode. I don't remember everything in number 13 since been a long time, 4 years or so since I did that episode. So I got to think that, you know, what happens in the NWA was the NWA got to be so large. At one time, probably in the late 70s, early 80s, there were as many as 30 promoters in the National Wrestling Alliance.
Whoa.
And from 5 different countries.
Wow.
I
Okay.
mean, they were from all over the world.
Yeah.
And they all came to these meetings in Las Vegas. And you stayed there for about 4 days. And you met every day. And you talked about all different kinds of things. But the picking of the champion was something done totally different than people would imagine, I think, as far as the NWA was concerned. Because you had 30 promoters, if you think about it, Dave, and everybody sat down there, if you went there and just said, okay, we're going to pass out this card and we want you to write the name of the guy on your card that you'd like to have as world champion.
Mm-hmm.
And you got 30 different guys.
So that represents 30 territories.
30 territories,
so,
all over the world.
I bet you got
Japan,
30.
Australia, Mexico, England, everywhere.
Are you suggesting that you would have 30 different names?
You might have 30 different names.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a possibility that you'd have 30 different names, and you might have the one guy that gets the most having 5 names. So 25 of them are going to be unhappy. So, so what they decided is the NWA decided that this is going to be done by a small contingent of promoters. They're going to drop that 30 down to about 5 promoters. And these 5 promoters are from the biggest companies, usually from the biggest companies. Those are the guys that decided on the champion. So that made it a lot simpler. And you had a lot less bitching because guys say, well, I put so-and-so and I put so-and-so on my card. And, there wasn't big choice as to what was going to happen. And so never did all the members ever get to vote. They never did that ever in all the meetings, the NWA meetings I was in. And, if they'd done that, I think it would have been impossible to pick a champion. So, and I'm going to tell you why I think they did it with a small contingent of promoters. There was another great reason for it. And I always do this to you, Jay, Dave, when we're doing Studcast.
Mm-hmm.
The wrestling promoters needed to be kayfabe too. Because they couldn't keep their mouth shut, right? Yeah. So if you had all 30 of these people knowing who the next world champion's going to be and what night it's going to happen on, how many people are going to never know about or are going to find out?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And what another thing that would give it away is if the people in the crowd knew the promoters and they looked around and there's 30 damn promoters in the crowd for this championship match, right?
Imagine a big mouth promoter, Ron. Wow.
Yeah, can't imagine that, right? So they're all big mouth guys, and they just couldn't keep their mouth shut. So they said, okay, only a few people are going to know about it, and you're never going to know when it's going to happen and who it's going to be. And that worked great.
All right.
That worked great.
Okay, moving forward. Last one. Maybe you recognize the name. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Walk Smith from Australia. Do you have any plans to do an Australian Super Studcast?
Well, Walk, man, nice to have you back, Walk. I hope I didn't upset you, man. We kind of. I noticed Lily hadn't been you beautiful little dog, man. I noticed Lily hadn't been saying much lately, and probably hard to keep her quiet, especially since she can write and all that stuff. So you got to watch that dog, So Walk, and you know this, I'm sure, Walk. Well, I know you do because Walk is one of the greatest fans I got, man. I love Walk, and he's out there in one of the most beautiful countries on the face of this earth. If I had to live any place other than the United States, it'd be in Australia. And I did 3 straight Studcasts on Australia. Number 65, number 66, and number 67. All 3 of those Studcast back to back, 3 hours of Studcast, maybe more because they're all usually over an hour on Australia.
Yep.
And I love that country, man. And although in all those 3 episodes, I told all kinds of stories about wrestling there and just the experiences of living in that country, the people, the animals, the deadly animals, the sharks, and the snakes, and all of the bad things that could happen to you in Australia. So. And, if people haven't listened to those, I think you'll find them extremely interesting, that number 65, 66, and 67, because, I really go into detail about what it was like living in that country for 3 months. And but Walk, I got to tell you, to do a Super Studcast of Australia, I might not have to go down under again, mate, I might have to go down there and see how you boys are doing again. Things have changed there, no doubt. So, there's a lot of worse things could happen to me than having to go down to Australia again. So, and I could pet Lily if I would come down there walk. So, I really miss that country. And, I'd like to do another Australian Studcast. I don't know if I'd got enough information. I'd have to stay there a while to get probably a Super Studcast worth of information. But yes, Walk, I don't know that I'll ever do an Australian Super Studcast. I'm sad to say I don't think I'll ever be back to Australia again. But I sure wish I could, man. It's a beautiful place. I'd love to go to Cronulla, man, and catch a few waves. It'd be wonderful. Maybe run from a white or two.
Never say never, Stud.
Yeah, well, that's true, man. That's true. But thank you, Walk, and hey, great for getting back, and say hello to Lily for me, man. I appreciate it.
There you go. And listen, if you haven't heard these, number 65, 66, and 67 at tnstud.com, tnstud.com. Every episode of the Studcast is available right there. You can go back and you can hear those right away. 65, 66, and 67, as the Stud said. That goes a few years back on the Studcast. All right, so listen, there it is. Another Southeastern Rewind, Tell Me More, where the Stud answered 5 questions about Studcast number 13. It's now on Ron's new home on YouTube. Hey, remember to find Southeastern Rewind on YouTube. Subscribe, ring the bell to get reminders on when the greatest stories in wrestling will be dropped on YouTube. And be sure to tell your friends about Southeastern Rewind as well. For Ron Fuller, I'm David Summers. We'll be back soon with another Tell Me More.